But I wanted to start in 82 because the reason why I'm a wrestling fan isn't because of actual wrestling. It is because Hulk Hogan was in Rocky 3. I probably watched that movie, no less than 30 times when I was a kid.
Mhm.
And so seeing him in that movie, in that famous scene, they're doing the wrestling match for charity, and Hogan is roughing him up, and the Ultimate Male versus the Ultimate Meatball as Thunder Lips. Like he seems like the world's biggest human being in that movie. The way that they shot him, his character, uh, he could give so much thanks and kudos to how he was shot in that movie with Stallone, who is like, he's not that big of a guy,
Yeah.
but still, he's just giant movie star, and you see this pro wrestler who just dwarfs him. And that is my gateway because I would see wrestling, I would about 3 years later, and if I didn't recognize him as being Thunder Lips, I'm not sure if I would have latched on immediately. But then you start getting curious, like, oh, like he was a bad guy
Mhm.
in Rocky 3 and he's the good guy here. And so that really is what piqued my interest, was from Rocky 3 in 1982.
Yeah, I first saw him in 1982 in a Rocky film, but I just knew him as a wrestler, and I was too young to really seek out wrestling at that point. But my after Rocky, I think my next exposure was the wrestling cartoon, the Rock and Wrestling cartoon
Mhm.
that came on. Was it Saturday mornings? And I didn't put two and two together. I just these are just wrestlers that are cartoon characters. And then so that's how my initial exposure to Hulk Hogan.
Do you know the trivia question of who does the Hulk Hogan voice in Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling?
Oh, I forget. We talked about this years ago. What is it again?
It is Brad Garrett.
Oh, yeah,
Brad
yeah.
Garrett does the voice from what was he? Everybody loves Raymond.
Everyone loves
Raymond,
Raymond.
was
Yeah,
that his?
yeah.
Yeah. So 1983, and I have been covering the year 1984 with my buddy Draven on the Fight Game Media YouTube channel and podcast network for Observe This. And 1983, we actually kick off the 1984 podcast in late 83 because that's when Hogan comes back to WWF. He like leaves AWA just in the weeds. He's like, see you guys later. He's still doing stuff for New Japan Pro Wrestling, but he is Vince McMahon's pick for his top guy in the expansion. And, I'm watching. I didn't really watch a lot of it, but there's a lot of YouTube stuff where you can see the early like January, like the December and January stuff before he actually beats the Sheik. And in every promo that he does, it's all about the title. I'm
Yeah.
here to get the title because I want to be the world champion. And like that's literally what it was back then. Like
Hmm.
it's like it wasn't, at least wrestling when you're watching the TV tapings of the matches, like it's not the soap opera that it is today with all the backstage segments and stuff. It's like Mean Gene is out there, Hogan, Mike, I'm coming. I'm going to be in St. Louis. I'm going to win this match, and I want the title. That's why I'm back. So that it was a very fundamental and very straightforward run for him. And I remember reading, while we're doing Observe This, I'm reading the observers from that time frame, and Dave is like, "Yeah, he's gonna win it. Like maybe before you even read this, he's gonna win
Hmm.
it, but it's gonna be sooner than later." And
Yeah.
this is the idea for Vince McMahon.
Yeah. That's the iconic pin, right? Where Hogan has Iron Sheik locked up in that pin, and he's just like roaring, and the crowd's going nuts. And Vince tried to recreate that scenario in 1994 with Diesel when he quickly
Yeah,
beat Bob Backlund for the
yeah.
title after Backlund won from Bret Hart's Survivor Series. That didn't really connect with Kevin Nash, but I mean, Vince had a plan right away, and he didn't. It's kind of cool, like he didn't take like 6 months to crown him. He just said,
Mm-hmm.
"Nope, we're going to start you off," because that's what WWF was built on before, right? The strong babyface champion and heels chasing the babyface champion. So right away, boom, and it was just perfect booking. I think we talked about this a few months back when you had the foreign heel and the Iron Sheik and and then you have the great American hero and Hulk Hogan coming in and beating him very convincingly, like
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes, I think it was,
Mm-hmm.
and a really exciting 5 minute match. So, and it's weird. I recently WWE put on, they put on the Vault. They're putting a bunch of all these old shows on,
Yeah.
and there is a Omni show, and it's from 1983. Oh man, what's the date? I think it might be. It's like soon. The Sheik is leaving to go win the world title from Bob Backlund, right? Here
Mm-hmm.
he's putting over Brett Sawyer. So
Wow.
in the Omni, and then just that was a fascinating watch. When I watched that match, I looked at the date and looked at the year. I'm like, wait a second, he's going to be the world champion, the biggest promotion in the world in a few months. So very interesting stuff.
So he wins it on January 23rd, 1984 at Madison Square Garden. He will go on to hold the title for 1,474 days. 1985 is the very first WrestleMania, which he headlines, teaming with Mr. T against Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. And that show, and so Dave's 1985 observers are going to be in book form probably within the next couple of weeks. And I can't wait for that because I am so interested to read the build to the very first WrestleMania. Like, I'm so intrigued about, how this show was being put together back then and the celebrities being involved. Obviously, Cyndi Lauper is involved. And then picking the celebrities to be involved in the very first WrestleMania. Billy Martin and Muhammad Ali and Liberace and probably a couple others that I'm forgetting. But 1985 is like we're sticking the flag in, like
Yeah.
we're going to be number one. And I'm not sure. I think there's even been some research of late that says, even if WrestleMania is not the giant success that it was, like they're probably not going bankrupt, even though I know that was the story that
Mm-hmm.
Vince and company told. But still, a giant risk. There was a precursor to that though, because Starcade had happened in late '83. So you have a little bit of data about how they did it. Now they did it a little bit differently, but you're like, okay, there's this giant show, and you can sell tickets to it, and then you can put it on the big screen and sell tickets across to the big arenas, and that was fine, and we can do it a little bit bigger and better because cable television is growing, and you have the partnership with MTV, which is what all the young kids watch. And so that helps set the stage for the very first WrestleMania. When's the last time you watched that show?
Has to be like 3 or 4 years ago. I think I watched the whole show, and I remember the tag team match, Hulk Hogan, Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff was actually a pretty good match, all things considered. With tease and experience and
Yeah.
all, it's pretty exciting. And of course, they get away with the big stars and the popularity, and then people are just going nuts for everything.
Yeah, the funny parts of that show are actually in the production because there's like
Hmm.
people walking behind live shots and stuff. It's like I think like King Kong Bundy or something walks behind Lord Alfred Hayes or somebody when they're like doing a stand up. But yeah, that was the way that they were doing that show, and this was even really before pay per view because pay per view doesn't really get big until 87, 88, 89 when they can really take advantage of that giant pay per view audience.
Yeah.
So 1986 is more Hogan on top. He's the Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff turns against him, which is like the most memorable angle of my childhood before the Mega Powers, because the Mega Powers is basically a bigger version of Hogan and Orndorff as a tag team,
Yeah.
and so Orndorff turns on Hogan. And I was that was like the first real angle where I felt like my heart, like I was so dialed in as a 9 or 10-year-old. And I was like, I felt real betrayal. I was like, how could you? How dare you? Like, this is not supposed to happen. But then when you watch back, you're like, man, Hogan's kind of a dick to Mr. Wonderful. Doesn't return his phone calls. Like, what's
Yeah,
going
yeah.
on? But yeah, that's a very memorable one for me.
Oh yeah, the clothesline. That's the celebration that they win a tag team match, and Orndorff gives them the clothesline, and it leads to that big gate in Toronto. That big show was like 60 something thousand people, and memorable Saturday main event matches, and there's a lot of people, a lot of the lore. I think I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe Dave Kidd might dial down more on the obit that comes out on Friday, but where a lot of people thought they had Paul Orndorff on standby for WrestleMania 3.
Mm-hmm.
If Andre could not go for the WrestleMania 3, but so that was I think Hogan's first great feud. I think it could be Orndorff, right? Or I guess Piper, then Orndorff,
Yeah, but
and
Piper and
then
him was never really that much of a singles feud because
there was never
Piper
a
wasn't going to
conclusion.
lose. He was never going to lose to
Yeah,
Hogan.
there was never a conclusion to that to that feud.
You get a little bit of Savage Hogan, I think,
Mhm.
in there.
Yeah, in
And
86,
yeah,
85, 86.
there's
Yeah.
some Savage Hogan in there, but yeah, Mr. Wonderful's the one that they do big business. I think there's a Kamala feud in there that does like some
That
really insane business too around the house shows.
That's what I liked about, if you look at the results from like 84 through even 87, there's a lot of variety in Hogan's opponents on the house shows. He's Beefcake, there's Rick Rude, there's One Man Gang, there's like you said, Kamala, various others, Don Morocco. So it's like, and then eventually it got more like every house show was the same.
There was supposed to be a Jake feud, but they ixnayed that one because
Yeah.
Jake got cheered at some point over him. So it's like,
That's a WWE Vault request everyone's been looking for. Is I think the Piper's Pit with no, the Snake Pit, excuse me, with
yeah.
Jake Roberts and Hulk Hogan.
So WrestleMania 2 is in 86. He's got the cage match with King Kong Bundy. And I will say, even though in hindsight it doesn't feel as big, the February of 86 Saturday night's main event, when Bobby Heenan is the manager for Don Morocco because Mr. Fuji is sick. Like nowadays you'd go, oh, angle alert. But back then I'm a little kid and I'm not really sniffing it out like that.
Yeah.
But Hogan and Morocco and then Bundy, and that's when Gorilla Monsoon uses the term that, people, I don't think people would use today, but, they Pearl Harbored Hulk Hogan. And that was a big one for me too, because WrestleMania 1, I wasn't watching it live. Like I had to wait for the video cassette and back then the video cassettes took a little while, but WrestleMania 2, I was actively watching. So I remember my buddies, David and Danny Fortson, they had the tape because I want to say it ran on HBO or Showtime. And so they taped it and, I had to wait like a week or two. And it was like the longest week or two of my life, just waiting for this tape so that I could watch the match. But yeah, WrestleMania 2 in hindsight is not as big of a deal because the show didn't really work as well. But to me, I was like, oh my God, Hogan and Bundy in the cage. This is insane.
Yeah, well, I think that match was a big match. I think the entire concept of WrestleMania that year, the 3 different locations, the simulcast, and just didn't really work. If they would have kind of kept it one big WrestleMania show, I think it would have been a little more fondly remembered WrestleMania than it is.
87, obviously Hogan and Andre, the Pontiac Silverdome, 78,000 or 93,000 or however you want to say
Whatever you want to
it.
say, yeah.
I will tell you how I watched this show. My dad gave a video cassette to a friend who had a pirate box, so I had to wait until that evening when they got home, and then I was able to get the tape. And in the back of your mind, you're like, what if they forgot to press record? Like I have to
Yeah.
I have to
All the trust.
prepare myself for the possibility that this thing wasn't going to happen, and I would be really upset. But how I watched the actual match live was through the squiggly lines,
Oh yeah.
and because you could hear the audio, but I had to know if Hogan was going to win or not. Like that, like I didn't care that I didn't get to see. It was almost like listening to the radio in a sense. Like listen to the wrestling match on the radio. That's kind of how I compare it. But when you didn't have when you had the scrambled signal, you could hear the audio. So you have the scrambled signal of WrestleMania 3, and my dad, before the match, he told me, he said, Hogan's got to win. And I said, how do you know? And he's like, well, I heard on the radio that someone bet like a large sum of money on him winning. And there's no way they're going to bet on a fake match if they didn't know that he was going to win. And I was like, it's a great argument. However, I'm still not convinced, and I'm still nervous about this. And so obviously he won, and then you watch it. Now, you know what the funny thing is until the WWE Network came out, I never saw a clean version of this show because the video cassette recording I had was we'd probably taped over whatever like 100 times. So the audio was really bad on that tape. And so that's just how I watched that show. So when the WWE Network came on and I watched the show again, I was like, whoa, like I can actually hear what people are saying. This is wild. But up to that point, right? Biggest wrestling show of our lifetime was WrestleMania 3.
Definitely. Still the best looking WrestleMania of all time, in my opinion. I remember showing my dad Hogan body slamming Andre. My dad's like, you can see him jump up. I was like, what? And like, I know, when I was a kid, right away, my dad pulled the curtain back like right away.
Yeah, me too. He was like, look, I got my heart broken when Pepper Gomez got jumped by Pat Patterson and Ray Stevens or whoever it was, right? Because I think that angle happened a few different times. But I'm not going to let this happen to you. You got to know, because you're not going to have your heart broken. But I still got my heart broken, even though I knew it was fake.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was crushed, man. When Stan Hansen beat Lex Luger for U.S. title in Halloween Havoc 90. But I was like, I don't care. This is awesome,
Yeah.
And then when he's just like, but look at him jump into that. But I'm like, no, that was all Hogan right there, So
well, he does walk into it, which is but it's not like he can really jump. He can kind of adjust his weight a little bit.
Yeah.
But see, my dad was the opposite. He was like, okay, everything is phony except when Hogan picks up Andre. You can't phony that. Though you can kind of phony it, but still, Andre was a ginormous human.
And do you remember the picture from that? Like Hogan being ready to slam Andre was everywhere, right?
Yeah.
On like the magazines, on the video game, not the video game, the board game. Did you have the board game? WrestleMania board game?
That's an interesting question. I don't think I ever did.
I had the board game. I never actually officially played it, but it came with a videotape of like certain spots, and it cost and you get like points at the end of the spot. So I would just watch that videotape, whatever it was, an hour. And but anyways, yeah. So it's definitely a legendary show, and a lot of people, of course, remember Randy Savage, Ricky Steamboat, as they should. It's a tremendous match, but Hogan Andre was pretty good. I think we had a pretty big debate about this like a few years ago about the match,
whether or not the match is good.
Yeah, them good or not, and we could probably circle back and maybe we'll do the Rock Hogan one, because that's a big debated one, right?
The part that I didn't like in that match, where I was like, okay, Hogan, you're really dumb, is this brother rarely ever busted out a pile driver, and for some reason he wants to do the pile driver on the outside. How are you going to pile drive Andre the Giant? You just tried to body slam him and he fell on top of you. How's this going to happen? So that's the main spot that I was really mad at.
Maybe thought he was going to do some good leverage to tights, going to pull one of those deals.
That you were talking about the picture. Like when he picks this dude up, you see all the flash from the cameras. And so friend of the show, John Muse, or friend of F4W, John Muse, he posted in the Discord. He has I don't know if it was a Polaroid or it's probably not Polaroid, but it was an actual flash camera of Hogan in that spot. I mean, he's a little far away. I don't think he had a zoom on that thing, but like he's one of those flash bulbs in the
That's cool.
audience.
Yeah. It's an awesome scene. They go to the hard cam shot of it, and you see all the flashes. It's like it's iconic.
Okay, 1988. This is my first foray into the pro wrestling business as a business. I've told this story before. Friday Night Main Event, Hogan and Andre Part 2, at least in my eyes, Part 2. I read the San Jose Mercury News that morning. I believe it was Mark Purdy wrote that Hogan was losing, and he had the whole thing, twin ref, whatever shenanigans. And so when we started hanging out with Big Dave, I asked him, I was like, were you the one who gave Mark Purdy that information? He was like, you know what? I don't remember, but you can go on the website right now, f4wonline.com, and you can go into the archive of the Observers. For some reason, there's a random 1988 Observer up there. It is that issue where Dave talks about knowing what was going to happen and writing about it and talking to someone in the San Jose Mercury News, and they published a story. So I went to school that Friday telling everybody what was going to happen on this show. Come back on Monday, I was the man that day because everything I said was going to happen because I read it in the newspaper absolutely came true. Now, back to our conversation about our dads. So I told my dad what was going to happen, and he's like, okay, so you know what's going to happen, and when it happens, are you going to be bummed out? And I was like, I don't know, because there was still a small part of me that was like, even though they wrote it, I still hope it doesn't happen, right? I still hope that whatever their story is like a fake story. And so after the match is over, I'm kind of mad, and he's like, but you knew. And it may have been the very first ever moment of this phrase. Yeah, but still. Because that's what I gave him. Yeah, but still. He didn't need to lose. He shouldn't have lost. And then I stormed off to my room, kind of upset. But that's how it was when you were a little kid with this stuff. And, you know, I don't know if little kids are like that these days. That maybe they know too much. But even though I knew what was going to happen, I was still that tied into that character of Hulk Hogan, and I was still so mad.
You ran out before...
which means they did a good job.
Did you run out before Andre declared himself tag team champion?
No. You know, my one flaw in this program though is I forgot to tape it. Like I was so like just eyes wide open watching this thing. I forgot to hit record on the thing, so I never watched it again until it came out on, you know, whatever DVD or whatever.
I remember being like looking at the picture in the magazine of like the twin refs and going like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You know, and then realized there was another Hebner in a different territory that was a twin brother.
So when they wrote that story, the reason why I believed it is because I was also watching Crockett. And so I knew that there was a Dave Hebner and an Earl Hebner. And I was like, okay, that makes total sense because they're twins and they just referee in the different things. So that's what sold me on the story of being legit. I was like, yeah, that makes so much sense. But yeah, that was a tough one for me. But in 1988, we get a really bad WrestleMania, by the way. I still have seen this WrestleMania like 20 times just because I had the 4-hour tape. But we get the beginning stages of the Mega Powers, which again is a kind of a rehash of Hogan and Orndorff, but just done in a much bigger way because Savage is much more colorful and flashier, and he's the babyface champion at this time. And so it, you know, we've got the valet and Miss Elizabeth, and you know, Hogan looking at her a little bit out of the corner of his eye, you know, because he had them jealous eyes.
Lust for Elizabeth.
The luster. And so this kicks off like a really tremendous storyline. So as a kid, I'm like, man, Hogan lost, but the the prize is still that he and Savage are the cool tag team, and they're the cool, the Good Brothers, the original Good Brothers. And so then that goes into '89 when, of course, they're going to break up, and they do it again on Friday night's main event, and then they lead to WrestleMania, which until gosh, what would have been until like WrestleMania 15 or 16, maybe it was still the highest bought pay-per-view in WWE
Mm-hmm.
history. Even WrestleMania 14 with Austin, I don't think that actually reached WrestleMania 5 levels, but that's how big that was. You'd have to you go another 15 years before they sell as many pay-per-views as they did for WrestleMania 5.
Yeah, it was an awesome. It's one of my favorite storylines in wrestling history, and it has an end, beginning, middle, and end, and it kind of extends after that too. Of course, when you add in Zeus and Bruce Bar Beefcake, but there's always no doubt that Hogan wins that feud, and it was memorable. I remember being sucked in and heartbroken when the Mega Powers exploded on February of 1989,
Yep.
and I just remember being so bummed, and then my buddy Chad, my buddy Billy, I remember we debated like who's gonna win this match. Like it was a big debate. Like I think we kind of all felt Hogan was gonna win, but then Savage was so good too. Like you're like, "Oh, I
Mhm.
don't know, who's gonna beat him, but they ended up having a really good match at WrestleMania 5. So um, uh, one of my favorite matches I think from that feud is the SummerSlam match with the Hogan and Beefcake versus Zeus and Macho Man, because just with how amazing Macho Man was in that match. But I kind of was thinking about, man, it'd be fun to kind of go back and rewatch that whole feud. I was just watching the first official handshake of the Mega Powers
Mm.
back in July of 1988, leading up to their what was that SummerSlam main event versus Ted DiBiase and Andre the Giant.
Mhm.
Elizabeth got a little risque on us.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
promising a little bit more than they
Yeah.
delivered. They were promising a itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini. Though, Elizabeth had showed her lower
Hmm.
half very well for for the young audience that we
There's
were.
when you watch that video, there's like a scene, like there's a cut to just Elizabeth's face, and there's Vince McMahon. Oh my, wow, this guy.
Yeah, we should have known. Also in '89, and if anybody wants to listen, in the Fight Game Media podcast channel and the YouTube channel, we did a series of movie reviews called Popcorn and Pile Drivers, and we reviewed No Holds Barred. And No Holds Barred is another part of our fandom and our childhood because of how bad that movie is. And I remember exactly where I saw that movie because it was I don't think it even showed in a mainstream movie theater out where I lived, but in the budget theaters, it was very quickly in the budget theaters, and I got to watch it in the budget theaters. But yeah, John and I did a review and kind of recapped the time frame and the match and the movie and that on that. You can do a Google search for it, Popcorn and Pile Drivers. But that was Hogan's first foray into the movie business. Vince McMahon, the story of them not liking the script and going into the hotel room and just rewriting it, all that garbage, but
Yeah.
not a success, not something that they hung their hat on, or that is ever going to go into the WWE Hall of Fame or anything, but it was also a part of like, wow, Hulk Hogan is actually in the movies now.
What was his most successful movie? Was No Holds Barred his most successful? Like just numbers when it comes to box office?
Oh man. Um
It
I
has to
would have
be.
I would have to think it beat Suburban Commando.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a very young Undertaker in that movie.
Which I just watched I watched some of those retro YouTube. They kind of review stuff from like the
Mhm.
in the 80s and 90s, and Like I think it was the worst movies of I think it was 1992 or something like that. Whatever Suburban Commando was on that list. Whatever year it came out in the 90s. So
Mr.
Mr. Nanny,
Nanny was also there. That he did the Three Ninjas stuff.
some Surfing Ninjas or something like that.
Y-
Right? He did Santa. Was he Santa and Muscles? Is that someone
Uh-huh.
else?
I think
Yeah.
he was Santa and Muscles.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, No Holds Barred had to be the best, the biggest success or the most successful.
Remember the Nitro era? He was on some kind of TNT like movie that they were promoting like on the show. I never watched it. I didn't watch Thunder in Paradise though.
Yeah, Thunder in Paradise
I did watch that.
it was a vehicle for him. So then 1990 is this one. It didn't sit well with me only because I knew what was happening, which is Hogan against Warrior,
Hmm.
and it was sort of like the out with the old, in with the new. And I liked the Ultimate Warrior, but I did not like the Ultimate Warrior more than I liked Hulk Hogan. So I sort of felt that this was set for Warrior to win. And I had some friends, and we watched it at my buddy's house, and they wanted Warrior to win because they were just kind of wanted something new. You know, Hogan had been
Yeah.
around for all of our childhood. They're like, oh, this Warrior guy's cool. I want to see him win. And I was like, nope, it's not going to work. It's a bad idea. Take the belt off of Hogan. It's a bad idea. And then Warrior won, and I kind of sat there with my arms crossed. I'm like, just wait. Just wait. Now, it's not like I knew what was going on. I was kind of being stubborn about it, but
Hmm.
Warrior does not become the new Hulk Hogan, and they come back and they put the belt on Hogan back in '91.
Yeah. WrestleMania 6, man. At that time, I was really into Warrior, and I was kind of more Warrior than Hogan going to WrestleMania 6. I think a lot of my friends were.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch it live. I remember I knew my friend Chad was taping it. I was gonna get the tape in a few days. And my buddy Billy was also watching live. And usually I would either go to one of those guys' house. I don't know what happened, but I couldn't go. And I remember my friend Billy calling me up, screaming in my ear that Mr. Perfect's not perfect no more because Bruce PK beat him. And then like just screaming and hanging up. Like that's what he did. Call me to scream and tell me his result. He didn't call me back at the end for us at the main event. But the next morning, I'm getting ready for school. My dad, who he worked for the City Sounds Day, went in really early, and he calls me up. Hey, John, I just found out that the Ultimate Warrior beat Hulk Hogan last night. I was like, what? Oh my gosh, unbelievable! I can't wait to see this. So that was like the talk and the with my friends at school when I saw them, and then finally got to take it. I think like a few days later and watched that thing over and over again. And it's a really good match. Obviously their second match was Wrestle Crap Legend, but
Yeah.
that match was kind of a masterpiece for what because all things considering. So, and then Hogan was tremendous at the end when kind of stole the spotlight from
Uh-huh.
Warrior with the old send off of the Legend, but yeah, Warrior wasn't box off, but again, like booking wise, they didn't have anyone hot and ready for the Warrior to challenge him. Like Perfect was already beaten by Hulk Hogan before. Rick Rude was always someone that Warrior beat before. So it's like there's no hot new challenge. The hot new challenger was being built up. The Earthquake was being built up for
For
Hogan's
Hogan.
return. Yeah, because he took
Do you
he.
now
What's that?
we know Hogan was very smart and very manipulative.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he knew that there was nobody for Warrior to really beat?
He had to because he's very smart.
Yeah.
You know. And yeah, there was no one. I think it was just Mr. Perfect, and it was just Rick Rude. I think there was Andre he's already beat.
Mm-hmm.
Who else was there at the time? Ted DiBiase, he's been beaten by Hogan, of course, for a very long time. There was really no one for.
I mean, his best ever opponent was Randy Savage.
Yeah, but that was, and then Macho feuded with Warrior. They had some house show matches and stuff, but they feuded on television. Started after Macho Man was the catalyst for Warrior losing the belt to Sergeant Slaughter
Yeah.
at Royal Rumble '91.
So we go into 91. Hogan gets the belt back. Wrestling is starting to not, or at least WWE is starting to become less popular.
I think
The
wrestling in a whole is starting to go down. Both
Wrestle,
companies.
WrestleMania 6 is at the Sky Dome, so they do 60,000 or whatever that number was. And then WrestleMania 7, they want to run the LA Coliseum, which holds 100,000. And this is where I stumble across Dave Meltzer, because he was writing in the National, which was the sports newspaper, the daily sports newspaper. And my dad would get the daily sports newspapers, and then he'd bring them home and he'd throw them on my bed when he got home. So I would read. And then I found the wrestling column. And I remember reading, Dave said that they are going to pull the WrestleMania from the LA Coliseum. They are going to say it's because of the war and the angle, but it's really because they weren't selling any tickets, and they were going to put it in the sports arena, which is where the LA Clippers played basketball. And so then I start to see all the television, and they talk about pulling the show and why they're pulling it. And I was like, man, these guys lie so much. It's incredible. So WrestleMania 7 happens. I still like that WrestleMania. Savage and Warriors have a really good match, and Hogan and Slaughter is a good match as well. But it's a little anticlimactic. You're like, there's no way this dude is losing this match. There's just absolutely no way.
Yeah, Rockers and the Barbarian Haku had a good opener. Yeah.
Later that year, Ric Flair comes in, and that is a whole other story that you and I have told on different versions of this show about my fandom. And I'm listening. We're watching the cable radio network so we can listen to Wrestle Talk with Dynamite D and all this stuff. So we know what's going on at this point. But Flair comes in, and in '92, we think it's going to be Flair and Hogan. Turns out to be Flair and Sid Justice before he became Sid Vicious in WWF. And this is like Hogan's swan song. Like, he does this crazy interview with Vince McMahon, like before the WrestleMania, and he's like, Vince is saying, or is this it? Is this goodbye? And I'm just thinking, like, what's going on here? Why, why would he retire? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And little did we know that the steroid controversy is right around the corner. And he goes on Arsenio Hall, and he says that he didn't take steroids, and then he's kind of like, really going at like superstar Billy Graham, who's calling him a liar, and just bad publicity. They're on those magazine shows, like what were some of those magazine shows that were syndicated? That
Donahue,
the tabloid, like more like the tabloidy stuff. They're like
Mark Bovich.
No, those are talk shows. I know the talk shows.
Inside Edition.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because Dave Current Affair. Dave around this time is on Donahue with Bruno Sammartino and John Arezzi and all those guys. So wrestling is starting to take a hit, because I think what happens is the parents of these kids, they go, okay, not only is this phony, but these guys are just lying through their teeth. They're actually not really good role models for our children. And so wrestling kind of comes down, but also a lot of those kids who were watching in '85, they're driving now. And, wrestling's not cool because you're doing other stuff. And that's why, that's part of the reason why we have like this cyclical nature, is because you kind of, your audience kind of grows up, and then you kind of find a new younger audience again. And which is why I think that this Netflix deal is really good for WWE, because they're just going after younger viewers. So that happens. And then Hogan is gone. He's gone for a whole entire year. 1993 comes around, WrestleMania 9. It's built around Bret Hart against Yokozuna. I was still watching. Monday Night Raw happens around this time. But I was like, it is not the same as when Hogan was ripping and running through this thing. And lo and behold, this dude comes back. He's like, this is the skinny version of Hulk Hogan. Like, he lost like 40 pounds from his previous figure. But he's back, and he gets the title again. WrestleMania 9. Bret Hart loses the belt to Yokozuna. Mr. Fuji challenges Hogan in the middle of the ring. And Hogan's bringing Bret to the back, and Bret's like, no, go take the match. And Hogan comes in. They throws the salt at Yokozuna, big boot, wins the title again just in an impromptu match. Now, I will say, I was very happy that happened, but it did feel like kind of cheap and almost like a heel win in a sense for the biggest baby face in wrestling. But he had the belt back. He was not there for very long, though. He was soon to depart. He would lose the title back to Yokozuna at King of the Ring, and Bret Hart has gone on record as saying that he was promised that Hogan would drop the belt back to him I think at SummerSlam or something that year.
Yeah, that was they took pictures and then facing off, and they were gonna build to that match. Yeah, this was not a good time to be a Hogan fan, in my opinion. It was kind of felt cheap. I remember being shocked that Hogan won the title at WrestleMania 9. I watched it in scrambled vision, and I couldn't believe what I heard. I remember going out the front yard and started shooting hoops in front of my house, and then talking to friends in the neighborhood and telling like, Hogan won the belt, and they're like, they weren't wrestling fans, so they didn't really care. But I was just like sitting there shooting hoops in shock. I never forget that. Thinking about how could that happen, and I was thinking like it's probably gonna get reversed on the TV. I was thinking all that kind of things, but yeah, and then like he soon lost it, and he was gone from the WWF, and then he went, then he's up doing movies, television, right? I think actually his Thunder in Paradise is when the Thunder in Paradise he started, and that next boom, there was rumors where he's gonna end up next, and that was a shocker to me.
Well, he goes on, actually, I think does an interview for New Japan Pro Wrestling, and he basically says something like, "This is the main belt, like this other belt is like a token or something," and this is before he loses the WWF belt. So he's also doing business in New Japan, making tons of money in New Japan, and then he does come over to WCW. Eric Bischoff and Ric Flair recruit him over. He doesn't ever want to work against Vince. He actually has to testify supposedly against Vince, but he testifies in a way that actually helps Vince's case.
Mm-hmm.
And Vince would always say that Hogan backstabbed him, and actually Hogan's testimony worked in his favor. And he could have really done damage to Vince, but he didn't. But he still, didn't ever want to compete against Vince. But then he did. He went to WCW and he beats Ric Flair at Bash at the Beach. Shaquille O'Neal is in the crowd, and with him, I think Mr. T as well.
Celebrates with him.
And so Hulkamania is running wild in 1994. 1995 is kind of a weird year because he's wrestling. He does have a series of matches with Big Van Vader that kind of end up in disappointing fashion. He's doing a lot of stuff with the Dungeon of Doom, and you could tell kind of the bloom is off the rose with the Hulk Hogan character in 1995.
Yeah, I was very frustrated at this Hulk. I was tired of it. He was wrestling all his old buddies from WWF, and what put me over the edge was the one match I wanted to see with Flair, of course, but after Flair was Hogan versus Vader, and they shot the angle at Starrcade in '94, and I was like so pumped for this. This is what I wanted to see. And at the Clash of Champions, building up to the big Super Brawl pay-per-view in February, Vader attacks Hogan, and he picks him up for that power bomb and hits a power bomb on Hogan. Oh my God, Hogan took a power bomb. I was so shocked. But then Hogan stood right up on his feet. And to me, it just totally deflated me. I'm like, well, of course he's winning now at Super Brawl. So, and they would continue to feud, like I think all that the whole year until at least August. I think it was August. No, excuse me, July. Actually, I think they just on WWE just decided to put that cage match from Bash at the Beach up a few days ago with Vader and Hogan. And I think that was the official end of their
What was the match? Was it a strap match where Ric Flair's actually the one that gets beat?
Yeah.
Ric Flair in drag, I think.
Yeah. No, Ric Flair in drag comes and attacks him. Was that uncensored? Oh, I think it was uncensored. I think you're right. I think that was the uncensored match. It led to a tag team match. I think it was, Flair and Vader versus Hogan and Savage, right? So yeah.
Yeah, this is a wacky time. So 96 obviously is the formation of the NWO. It kind of reinvigorates pro wrestling, which on a whole is just kind of down.
Mm-hmm.
And the NWO with Hall and Nash and Hogan, it feels like kind of like a cool thing, and wrestling is kind of cool again. And it also at the same time lights a fire under Vince McMahon, who now has to figure out what his thing is going to be because WCW is beating WWF.
Yeah.
And, that rarely ever happened. So, 1997, the NWO is still ripping and running. And at the end of 97, Stone Cold Steve Austin starts to get hot. And so now WWF has something on the other side that is actually getting interest. In 1998 is the big uh, Attitude Era versus the NWO, the Monday Night War. WWF finally beats Nitro. Raw beats Nitro and ends the streak, and then WWF is like well on their way. Though it would be over another year before WCW really went down. They were still doing great business, but they were
Mm-hmm.
just kind of out of ideas because they were running through the NWO thing so hard. Didn't really build anything up for the post NWO era
Yeah.
of WCW. And then we get the finger poke of doom, and we get Hogan and Nash like feuding, and Scott Hall going to rehab, and all these shenanigans that are happening in WCW that caused the downfall of WCW. And Hogan
Yeah.
turns back babyface with the red and the yellow, and it gives him like like he's reinvigorated for like a week or two, and then it's like doesn't it's not a big deal anymore. And then we
Yeah.
all know the end of WCW there in 2000 and 2001. And then in 2002, the NWO returns because Vince McMahon wanted to kill his creation. He wanted to poison his creation. So he brings back the NWO for WrestleMania 18, and we get Hogan versus The Rock in what would call his like last great performance, like his last hurrah. Like he has a good match with Vince McMahon at WrestleMania 19, but it doesn't do great
No. Yeah.
business. He would kind of be back and forth. He would do that match, which we'll probably talk about in a second, with Shawn Michaels at SummerSlam, which does fantastic business,
Mm-hmm.
but is memorable for the wrong reasons. One being Shawn Michaels throwing a toddler fit in the middle of the ring. But this is like WrestleMania 18, Hogan and Rock. That was a big, big deal. And, it really kind of cemented him as like, this guy knows how to do this thing. Like he
Yeah.
outshined The Rock at a WrestleMania. And knowingly, he knew Toronto was a great place for him. And it's like that. It's like that one moment. You're like, okay, Hulkamania was back for one day again in 2002.
Yeah. I remember watching that live with some friends, and we were just everyone's just going crazy for that match and just going nuts for the comeback and everything, and just like that live audience. And it's I saw a lot of those clips are floating online today, and seeing those clips again maybe really want to go back and watch that match from bell to bell. So I'm gonna definitely do that maybe this weekend. And but no, Hogan, I think they're like, okay, let's ride this wave after
Mm-hmm.
the success. So I think he ends up winning the world title again. Has a good match. I think with Trish Jericho
Yeah,
has a
yeah,
good
he actually
match.
does some jobs on the way out too. Like
Yeah,
loses
yeah.
to Brock.
He was the Brock. That was a big deal. Um, yeah. So he was business for this run. Too bad he wasn't business for Sting and
Yeah,
Starrcade '97.
yeah. I forgot to mention
Which
which is the best. I believe that was the best WCW pay per view of all time,
mhm.
the biggest at least.
Which to me is that's the start of the downfall right there. I think people, were really disappointed with what shook out with that, and then they're like, you know what, this guy Austin's pretty awesome. And then I think that had a lot to do. Though they're still strong in '98.
Yeah.
Of course, they got a little comeback with Goldberg and Goldberg beating Hogan on that
Oh
famous.
yeah.
They just talked about that during the build up to Goldberg versus Gunther in his final match. So Hogan was business on that one because it was business for him to say, "Hey, I drew this big old giant house,"
Yeah. Yeah.
even though I'm sure Goldberg had a lot to do with that as well. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So 2003 is the Mr. America storyline, which I know that you remember that.
yeah,
Hogan in a
yeah.
mask, which leads to him versus Vince at WrestleMania. He goes into the Hall of Fame in 2004. That was WrestleMania 20 in New York. That was like the celebration of like the stars from the very first WrestleMania. It was like him and Roddy Piper and Cowboy Bob, I think, went in there as well, and some others. And in 2005, he comes back. He is at the WrestleMania in LA. He does an angle with Muhammad Hassan
Mm-hmm.
at that WrestleMania. And then that's the same year that infamous Shawn Michaels match happens at SummerSlam. And then he starts to be a little bit more sporadic. There was a match with Randy Orton at SummerSlam that year. I think he and Brooke were on Saturday night's main event or something, and Randy like hit on her, and then Randy like hit Hogan like on a car with an RKO.
RKO, yeah.
I could have totally mangled that, but that is what my brain remembers.
No, I remember the RKO on the car, the hood. I remember that.
And this is also the time of the reality show, which was pretty successful there for a little
Mm-hmm.
while, which was Hogan Knows Best, which for him, he always said that was a vehicle to get Brooke a record deal. I watched a lot of those early episodes. I kind of dug it.
Yeah, my
And
wife
then
Katrina loved that show. I mean,
Hogan Knows Best.
she's like, I liked Hogan. I like that show, Hogan Knows Best. And it's just her favorite was The Rock. That's what she got into a little bit of that, and then seeing in the reality store stuff, of course, and then with Hogan Knows Best, that's how she got, and that's how she knows him. She doesn't know him as anything but Hulk Hogan, a former wrestler on this reality show.
And then in 2009, Hulk Hogan makes an appearance for TNA, and he is basically a TNA guy for a few years there.
Did
He's
you
an
watch any of this?
on-screen authority. I watched some of it, but it was so
Yeah,
hard for me to watch.
I watched. I was in and out. I think I watched that live episode they have against Raw. They got destroyed.
Yeah.
And I think I watched a couple things here and there, but I didn't really get a lot. Actually, that's kind of how I that's kind of how I watched TNA. I don't think I've ever watched it really consistently, maybe other than the pandemic when I had nothing else to do but other than watch TV, so
Yeah. Yeah. So he's in TNA for a few years. TNA is doing decent television numbers, and for today, for a cable
Mhm.
number, they
Yeah,
would actually be
yeah.
fairly impressive, but they could never drive the TV viewer to buy a pay-per-view. That was always the problem with their business. And in 2012, we get the sex tape leak and the Gawker lawsuit, the secretly recorded sex tape featuring Hulk Hogan and Heather, the then wife of Bubba the Love Sponge,
Heather
was
the Sponge.
was published by the website Gawker.
Yeah.
Hogan files a $100 million invasion of privacy lawsuit against Gawker, and it is a very. It wasn't just in the news, like like TMZ and all
Yeah.
that. It was just constantly in the news. It was on Howard Stern. I used to listen to Stern talking about it all the time. So Hogan actually wins that lawsuit, but what comes out of this is just nothing but negativity, racist remarks that he had said from that time frame. It may have even been from the same tape, which was recorded in
Yes.
2007. So that's the same time frame that he's doing the stuff with, like a little bit after the Randy Orton match. So it's from that time frame where he made racist slurs, and everybody knows what he said. Very derogatory. Had to do with whomever Brooke was dating. And that really, really, like, the steroid stuff affected him. He came back from that. The sex tape stuff was very embarrassing for him, and I think people kind of felt sorry for him in that way. But when that tape of the racial stuff came out, I think people washed their hands with him at that moment. And I know I did. You know, I was as big of a Hulkamaniac as you could get as a kid, and when I saw that, I was like, okay, like that. You don't say those things by mistake. You probably have said stuff like that before, and that wasn't anything that I could really forgive him for. So I was out. You know, I kind of related this to in some other places. One of my buddies runs a Discord, and it's, you know, there's some wrestling fans in there, but more casual than not. And they were kind of going through the Hogan stuff, and you know, I equated it to, like, you know, when Bill Cosby did his thing. Like, you
Hmm.
go, okay, I love the Cosby Show, but I can't really support him. And which probably means I'm just not comfortable watching the Cosby Show as much as I love that show. Puff Daddy, same thing. What the stuff that came out about him, you're like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm not comfortable really listening to this music anymore. Kanye West, I'm not comfortable listening to that stuff. R. Kelly, I haven't listened to an R. Kelly song purposely in a very long time. So I just kind of put Hogan with those other artists and said, okay, this is who they are, and I don't have to support them. I could still remember the childhood memories and be happy about those. Like, we just went through this
Yeah.
whole thing for an hour, and I did it with a smile on my face because that was my childhood for pro wrestling. But that turned the corner for me, and it's just not something that I could support anymore. And then we even saw this year at the
Really.
first Netflix Raw.
Yep.
He comes out, he gets booed out of the building. He was the biggest heel on that entire show. And I have a friend who was sitting right there watching this dude just get booed like crazy. And he was just like, you know, you're it's over, like, at that point. Now,
Hmm.
he was also hobnobbing with Trump and doing the MAGA stuff, and, you know, that was gonna affect him in front of that crowd more than likely as well. But he was never able he never really apologized for those remarks. I know he spoke to the WWE locker room at one point and more so made it about, like, you know, you got to watch your back and don't trust people more than really apologizing for what he said. So that's the
Yeah.
complicated part of his legacy where uh by the end, um you know, I think he was still very well known. He was still a celebrity. You heard from people who
Hmm.
you probably haven't heard from ever talk about wrestling, but
Yeah.
it's because he was a celebrity. He's very famous. But the people who really follow a lot of current stuff, they know they know why his name is kind of persona non grata, and that's how his legacy ends. Is his legacy ends with, you know, being a heel to a fan base, a large amount of the fan base that he was the ultimate babyface to.